Hi, folks. It's summer and things have got a bit busier in our day to day.
We've got kids everywhere. You might hear mine in the background right now playing chess with friends online, watching anime, all that stuff. And we've the presentation for the Uncanny Experience, which we're hopefully going to get some usable audio out of.
And we are hard at work on the 2025 Summer Special coming your way in 2 weeks, and I am so excited. It's going to be great.
So in order to make all of this happen, we're dipping into our Patreon exclusive Why Not Have a Drink episode where we discuss Thunderbolts with an asterisk.
We thought that was appropriate this week, what with the movie hitting digital and all that jazz.
And while digital is cool and all, what really matters is that the DVD is also out. Because we both know, and you know, because we're all of a certain age, we all know who's listening to this, that it's not really yours if it's a digital purchase.
So kick back with your refreshing summer beverage of choice and enjoy us gabbing about this movie for almost as long as the movie itself.
Because that's what we do.
And you love us for it.
Hi, folks, and welcome to another episode of Why Not Have a Drink. I am Tom Flynn, one of your co-pilots, joined as ever by my trusty sidekick.
Hey, pal, I'm not your sidekick. If anybody here is the sidekick, you're the sidekick. We're Jay and Silent Bob. Neither of us is the sidekick, okay?
I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with that association.
What, you're not comfortable being my hetero life mate, Tom?
I mean, I absolutely am that.
Hi, everybody. I'm the other half of the hetero life mate couple. I'm Chris.
Today, we are going to talk about Marvel's most recent release, Thunderbolts, asterisk.
Well, you can tell that we are not, really trying to ride the algorithm wave to catch attention here. We're talking about something a bit more timely than our last episode. That's certainly true. But, yeah, we're here to talk about it now that we've had the time to see it and talk about it, because we're busy people.
And can things be that are released directly to Patreon actually be said to be riding any algorithmic wave? Just
moving on. Well, it shows up in search terms and SEO and all that stuff,
Yeah, perhaps.
Wait, aren't you our search SEO guy? Wait a minute. Why am I talking about this and you're dismissing it? You know what? I feel like we've gotten off base and we haven't even talked about it.
Yeah, this is kind of how these Why Not Have a Drinks go. We are going to dig into Thunderbolts a bit, where, as usual, keep this light and breezy, have a good time with it, but, not go quite as deep in as we might with our Alpha Flight episodes.
So, Tom, how did you see this movie? Who were you with? Was it a good experience for you at the theater, or was it I'm at the movies experience?
I saw it in our local theater. It's fun, actually. This is the theater I grew up going to, and it was closed for quite a while and was reopened and then changed ownership and blah, blah, blah. But it's been functioning for a few years now, which has been great to have a place to take the kids to. So we saw it, I guess, the Saturday of opening weekend. Me, Aaron, the kids, a good neighbor, friend / practically cousin at this point. And yeah, it was fun. I was able to have a beer while watching it, which is such a change from when not that we were drinking beer when we were growing up going to the movies, but even the option to have that as an official, as a sanctioned thing within the theater is kind of nifty in its own way. But yeah.
So you brought your youngest, because she's what, 10?
11.
And she was on board and down with it?
Absolutely. She's been...
This is not 10-year-old or 11-year-old themes, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah.
That was a bit much.
We had a bit of a conversation about that. My 15-year-old got very upset at different points. There are things about this that hit him quite hard, which I think was rather the purpose of the movie. But yeah.
Well, I saw it I took my wife and her mother, because our youngest was off at scout camp for the weekend, and so we had a chance for the three of us to go see a movie, because normally the youngest goes over to Granny's to let us go to the movies, but my mother-in-law is the biggest Bucky fan in the world. She hadn't really seen any Marvel stuff till I came along about a little over 10 years ago, and over the years, I've watched a couple of movies with her here and there, and she loved Winter Soldier and just thought Bucky was the handsomest guy ever. And so anything with Bucky in it now, she is all about. So I know people who have gotten into Marvel and just taken the Ant-Man path. where they liked Ant-Man. So they watched the Ant-Man movies and then they jumped right into Infinity War and did Endgame. And that was the extent of they're like, yeah, I followed my favorite character. That was a really cool story. For my mother-in-law, that's Bucky, which is weird.
I think there are a couple things going on there. One, Sebastian Stan is in the conversation for like handsomest person on the face of the planet right now. But he's classically very good looking. And he also just has sort of that odd look to him that a lot of models do, that you kind of look at and it's interesting sort of thing. So there's that. But also her introduction, if it was Winter Soldier, that movie is such a throwback to 70s political thrillers and all that.
That's why I thought it would be the good movie for her to start with, because it is a 70s thriller that she would be able to recognize the beats and not get distracted by the superhero stuff.
Right. And coming out of that movie, what was before we started recording, you were talking about finishing up Iron Man 2 with your youngest, and her seeing the hammer at the end in the crater, and
she was so excited.
But that hook, right? What was the hook coming out of Winter Soldier? It's Bucky learning more about himself, trying to find out what's next, all that. So like for that movie to be the one to introduce her to it, combination of him being as good looking as he is, plus a good actor, plus like very interesting character, that totally tracks. And in a way, I'm not sure that Marvel has quite nailed a character introduction or a hook quite as well since then. Like I don't think any of them have worked anywhere near the way that Bucky's hook into the contemporary era of like that they're functioning in the MCU. Yeah, I'm trying to think of anyone else that's been that quality. Because it's almost like a the big five Avengers. Their sort of introductions with the hammer, with Cap's shield, with all these things. He kind of got that treatment in a way that others haven't.
Okay, I can see that. So yeah, we had a nice. It was before Mother's Day, but we took her out for Mother's Day, and it reminded me that 10 years ago in a different life, when I lived closer to my mom, my sisters and I would take my mom to the Marvel movie that came out at the beginning of May for Free Comic Book Day, because that's how this stuff, works. And so my mom has seen Avengers 1 and Avengers 2 and at least 2 other Marvel movies in the theater with me for Mother's Day, because she's very patient with me. She likes Vision, by the way. She thinks he's nice. He's a very polite robot.
Well, I'll also say that this is going to be a big movie summer for my family.
Me too. I was looking at everything. I'm like, wow. Ooh, yeah, well, it's back.
How to Train Your Dragon. It was huge for my kids when they were younger, and it got really big for them during quarantine. Like there was the series, all of it. So the live action version, my oldest is like, we are seeing that as soon as physically possible. Mission Impossible, there's interest in, but not quite the same excitement. But then, Fan 4, Superman, there's a lot happening.
My youngest is so looking forward to Superman ever since the trailer with Crypto. I mean, look, you put Crypto in there and you immediately drop by a couple of years your max audience. Like, it reaches down into a lower audience that would not have been interested in your movie.
Well, I mean, and depending upon when we actually get this up on the Patreon and people listen to it.
It might be out by now. Hope you liked it, guys.
the trailer that just dropped that starts with Lois interviewing Clark as Superman. I think that trailer, all the other trailers have been exciting for me. That one kind of indicates to me that they know what they're doing, that they have a good sense of, yes, there's the hook for the kids. There's this representation of him saving the little girl from the accident, possibly showing up to this war zone to stop things. But now it's like, it's getting at who he is and why he's doing what he's doing. And it feels correct.
And well, I don't know the names of any of these actors because I am clearly not hip to the whys. I'm doing a podcast about Alpha Flight, Tom. I am not paying attention to the modern world. But the Lex Luthor that they have in there somehow looks like the Frank Quitely drawing come to life somehow. I can't put my finger on how or why, but there's something kind of spindly about that guy that is it's working. Yeah,
the actor's name is Nicholas Hoult, and he's been in a whole host of things. Actually, he was in X-Men First Class. He was Beast.
Oh, really?
Yup.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I see it. I hope he still has the big feet.
Jesus Christ.
All right, well, back to the movie we're here to talk about. So we're going to skip the plot overview. If you don't know the plot, the fuck are you doing here? Love you guys. Thanks for subscribing. Skipping right into the cast. We touched on Sebastian Stan as an actor. In the context of this movie, I did appreciate the... In the Brave New World episode, we were saying, what the fuck is Bucky going to do in Congress? He's used to punching and shooting people instead of actually like talking to them and having to go through these rational debates. And apparently Bucky realized that too once he got into Congress, because he immediately fucked off and started punching and shooting people.
Yeah, I gotta say that actually is probably the thing that annoys me the most in this movie. Is it feels so throwaway. It feels like Bucky being in Congress feels like it would have been something that was dealt with over the course of like 4 or 5 issues in a monthly comic, right? So you actually have some legs to it. You get to explore it, all that. They introduced it in Brave New World that he was running, I think.
And then bam.
And then he's in. Okay, fine. And then as soon as he's in, he's fucking out. So just it feels... It feels like there was some sort of like storyboarding that happened about how to get here and here and whatever. And so they worked backwards. And again, like I mentioned this in something that probably may or may not have gone up at this point. Working backwards in terms of breaking a story is not the worst thing in the world, but it absolutely can lead to some pretty shitty outcomes. And this just feels... It feels like a waste of everyone's time, like the whole Bucky and Congress.
The Congress aspect,
yeah, that part. I mean, look, Bucky as
he didn't need to be there. A sitting congressman could have contacted him and said, "Look, we need this evidence, and we think that she's destroying it. And can you secure this for us? We need to know if this is working or not." But then you have him being manipulated for political purposes, and it becomes a different story. So I can see wanting to eliminate that.
There are no stakes to Bucky being in Congress other than to like have this scene happen and this scene happen and this scene happen. And that just seems very lazy in a way that a lot of the earlier Marvel movies would not have been lazy in the same way. But the only other aspect of that's irritating is his hair. Like, I don't see why the hell he has to have the long hair again, other than to be like, oh, look, he looks like Winter Soldier. Okay, fine. And then we move on with our day. But,
well, this was the most government that we've seen in a Marvel movie. Like, this and Brave New World have a lot of federal level government stuff going on in a way that, like you said, I was doing Iron Man 2, and there's the industrialist, and you've got the sleazy senator, who I believe is the senator from, the Silly Adventure in Machine Man, the Alpha Flight hat, the same, senator's name, but it's, slipping from my head right now. Brickman, maybe?
Yeah.
But, the way that those industrialist government relations happen is one thing, and they handle it pretty well in Iron Man 2. And then, Robert Redford and, the highest level, world level government stuff that he's doing in Winter Soldier is another level of things. But this specifically, looking at being in Congress and on committees and stuff like this. Now, listeners, you probably don't know this about me, but I have a master's degree in political science, and I used to work on campaigns, and I've worked in State House and stuff like that. So I've been in those rooms and things like that. And what killed me about this movie, Tom, is they kept using the word impeach.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. She doesn't get impeached as the head of the CIA. The Congress doesn't have the authority to get her out of there. If she is in charge of the CIA, she serves at the pleasure of the president, whoever that may be at the moment. Was there no one in the writer's room who understood how this stuff worked? Because it was like getting smacked with a fish, like over and over again. I realized we kind of came out swinging a little bit hard about the stuff that we didn't like about this movie.
Which I think is fine, because there's a lot that we both really like. And I think
overall, we're just ripping it all out in 8 minutes so that we can squee for the next 40.
Yeah, because overall, it's a really good movie. A couple of things I just wanted to like circle back on. The senator that is in the committee hearing with Tony in Iron Man 2 also appears in Winter Soldier and is the one that it's played by Gary Shandling, and is and is a member of, like you said, a member of Hydra, which I think might be a specific comic tie-in. On the point of the Robert Redford world government thing, that element always felt more like Marvel to me, because it suggests a sort of Illuminati, and not Illuminati in the superhero sense, but Illuminati level of this is where the real decisions get made, and everything else is just sort of like making sure that the water flows and all that. But the real important
the
stuff,
illusion of democracy,
exactly. And now we have in this movie this, like, again, still the illusion of democracy, as the head of the CIA is the former head, or still head, which again, you know, dovetail.
Yeah, it was a little amorphous in terms of, you know, they kind of shoved the Contessa on us pretty fast and hard. However, that's kind of how it comes. Like, when a bad guy pops up, it's not always with a villainous thing. Sometimes they work their way through the positions until they pop up, and look at Stephen Miller, you know?
Well, it's also an interesting, I mean, I don't think this is intentional necessarily, but it's an interesting reflection on our current, like, political moment, right? Where, like, how much have we discovered over the last, 8 years and some months of how the government works is much more based off of pretty please than actual law or rule or what have you. So to have someone who is brought into the security apparatus whose main qualification is that they were probably running some pretty nasty development stuff, is now the head of the CIA, but now is interacting with the more normal machinery of government, which doesn't really know how to deal with this person. Like, it's not even trying to be allegory. It's just sort of there, and I get it, but it feels like too many worlds colliding at once for me, and that's fine, because it's fine. That serves the story in it is a more consistent way of telling this story than what they were doing with Bucky, I think. But, you know,
for all the wobbles that we've discussed already of getting this movie and the story up and running, I kind of think of it as trying to start riding a bike, you know, when you're having to start out going uphill from a dead stop, and there's you've got no momentum and you're barely balancing, and as you get the power moving up, there's a bit of a wobble there where it could go either way if you mess it up. And I feel like this movie got through that wobble and then just took off for us.
Well, I wouldn't even put it. I wouldn't even put it that way. I think it's more because a lot of this was kind of happening throughout. It's the various threads. These threads don't ultimately detract from the larger braid of the storytelling, which is just a fucking tortured metaphor. But like the other elements that are taking place here are like more than compensate, like are good and are fun. It's just, if we are going, and I don't know how worthwhile a conversation is, and I think I can just maybe say it like this and we can move on from it. If we're comparing any of the more recent Marvel movies to phases 1 and 2 and what they were doing there, they didn't have the same kind of wobbles or the same kind of forced
urgency,
or forced beats in the narrative just to get us to the next part of it. Like they're just simply better written movies. That doesn't mean that this one isn't enjoyable and isn't actually probably one of the better ones they've done in quite a bit, because I think that the more important thing for a Marvel movie is the actual like emotional core of it than necessarily the pure storyline.
Filmmaking.
Right.
Well, emotional core, storyline, and filmmaking. Those are the big three that make up a good movie.
And the emotional core for the Marvel movies tends to overwhelm or have greater import than the other two. I'll point to Thor 1 as being much more story driven, but not as good as some of the other ones because it was so story driven. The best,
and it doesn't have that same level of emotional.
The best parts
core
of that movie are when those emotional moments are taking place. Yeah. When Loki and Thor are interacting, when Odin and Thor and Odin
when Thor gets hit by a car.
All those combinations of look. These are fucking ensemble movies, and that's what they're supposed to be. And a great ensemble movie, the story often takes the back seat to a certain degree, you know, not such that it becomes incoherent, but to a certain degree to the interaction among the characters. And this one, Thunderbolts, absolutely hits that ensemble component to it, which is probably why they had to kill Taskmaster.
I've read a lot where people have talked about how quickly Taskmaster was dispatched from the movie, and I'm actually okay with that. I didn't particularly love that take on the character because I did love the Taskmaster from late Deadpool Volume 1. and the Agent X run. That guy was fantastic, and I really wanted to see him. And this is a different character, and that's okay. And this is how that character's story ended, and that's okay because I didn't like her anyway.
Well, I mean, I had after my kids watched Black Widow, I had to explain who Taskmaster was in the comics, and all three of my kids were like, "Oh, that's actually a really neat character." After this movie, I had to re-explain who Taskmaster was because the character made such low impact in Black Widow.
They didn't do anything.
They didn't do anything with it, and it was just a Taskmaster is a better character than what they put on the screen, and that's not because of what the actor did or because of how they cast or anything like that. They just didn't do a good job with that character, and so
there was no reason for that to have been Taskmaster. They didn't even use the powers in interesting ways, and not just here, but also in Black Widow.
Exactly. So, but also to my point, like the joking point I was making, which wasn't entirely joking. That's not a character who is really going to function well in this larger ensemble. So removing them from the board early on, and also kind of setting the tone for, people are going to die bad in this movie. That was probably the correct way.
And I feel like people wouldn't be talking about Taskmaster quite so much if somebody else had died later on in the movie. Like, I know who I would pick, but everybody would pick somebody different.
Yep.
But if somebody had died later in the movie, and not at the end, but along the way, and made it more of a, I'm not going to say that because I don't know enough to make that analogy.
What was the analogy you're going to do?
Well, no, because then you're going to put it on the air.
No, I'm not. I won't this time.
Oh, that Star Wars movie where they're all, is it Red One? Rogue One? I haven't actually seen it.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's probably the best Star Wars.
That's what I hear, it's
the best Star Wars movie. I'll take that. I'll adjust that. It is the best movie that is also a Star Wars movie. Like it is the best movie of the bunch.
That is higher praise than the best Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
I also haven't watched Andor. Star Wars is not really my strong suit.
I think...
Although I did do Skeleton Crew and I liked it.
Rogue One and Andor, I haven't really watched much of Andor. I've been meaning to, but from what I understand, who I know watches Andor, Rogue One and Andor will be very much your shit.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I just have trouble.
But Rogue One specifically is like it's almost like a 1950s, 1960s war movie, but like hard bitten one. Like it's great. It's really good. You would get a huge kick out of it.
Anything with an Alan Tudyk robot in it, I'll give a try eventually. Let's, instead of talking about the actors and their characters, because we've kind of been settling in here, hope y'all are as comfortable as us listeners, can we talk about the shame rooms that they got caught up in? Or do you want to talk about Bob first?
I think we need to get into Bob. Again, if we're assuming that y'all have watched this, so you know about Bob.
I appreciate that they didn't pull punches with his backstory.
Well, the version.
They pulled a little bit of punches, I guess. Now that I think about it.
Well, and what do you mean by his backstory?
Because if I recall my comic books fake history correctly, how he got his powers was he broke into a lab and stole the serum, thinking it was drugs because he wanted to get high because he was just a fucking crazy junkie, and ended up with the power of the Sentry because reasons. But he was always that schizophrenic junkie underneath. And they had that there where they had his mental illness and they had his substance problem. But he signed up for it, and it was the scientists who were unethical for doing this on him when they never should have, instead of him being like really that much of a drug seeker that he ends up in this place.
Well, my understanding, and I mean, the comics better than I do, but my understanding is there's really never been a fully settled origin for Sentry, that they've never really been able to as different people have approached him, there have been versions where the Void is actually the real Robert Reynolds and the Sentry is a side effect of the Void, not the other way around. And, or they're not even even billing. They've messed around with his backstory so much that I think they chose a very streamlined approach. And I think this idea of him wanting to be better and then signing up for the study, it also very much fits this moment, and especially this moment in culture and online culture in terms of being better, optimizing, how to break free, all that. Like, this guy was either going to sign up for a study like that in Southeast Asia, to, like, a drug that was going to cure him of his other drug problems, or he was going to listen to a lot of Jordan Peterson. One of the two was going to happen.
The Sentry Void thing, I really liked the effect that they used for the Void. I thought that looked really cool and was noticeably jarring.
Yep.
That was pretty cool. The story of the Sentry and the Void reminds me of, and again, I didn't intend to talk about this, so I'm kind of failing about this, but there was in Cosmic Marvel, I think it was Captain Marvel, or else it was the Golden Guy, Adam Warlock. And then, like, in the future, he becomes his own nemesis.
Adam Warlock.
Oh, what was it?
Adam Warlock turns into the Magus. M-A-G-U-S.
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you. I was spacing out here because I couldn't figure it out. Magus. But yeah, where he's his own worst enemy, except the Magus had that bitchin' afro.
That was pretty great. It was more of a perm than an afro.
It was a choice, man. Yeah, you're right. It was... Magus was a weird guy, but that kind of split duality seems like a thing that has been recycled, and then the Sentry is just like the biggest scale possible of doing that type of story.
Well, it's also interesting you bring up Captain Marvel, because there was the incarnation of Captain Marvel that was Captain Marvel's kid, who gets the power cosmic, and I just remember one specific comic where he's about to... They relaunched the Captain Marvel comic. It was Captain Marvel's son that inherited the powers, and he was about to turn on his, like, cosmic awareness. And he does it, and he starts making decisions. And he's trying to weigh out, like, the cost of one life versus the cost of all these other things. And then as he does it, he realizes that the little girl he chooses not to save would have actually ended up being something of a messiah and bringing peace to large swaths of the universe. But instead, he saved this convoy of 100,000 people, many of whom will die in a war later, and he eventually breaks because mortals are not intended to have cosmic awareness. And the last line from the narration box from that specific issue was something along the lines of, what if it turns out, you have all the power of the universe and all the knowledge of the universe, but what if it turns out the universe hates you? And it's trying to break him or whatever.
That ended differently than I thought it was going. I thought it was going to be. But what if the best move is to not use it? But no, the universe hates you.
Well, I mean, so in some respects, that is the best move. But I mean, that's also what's happening with Bob here, is that he has all this power. Even if he were a more stable individual, like, I don't know how Steve Rogers does with all this power. Like, there's that whole conversation about this super soldier serum making you more yourself. And so people who are venal and prideful and obsessed with their own image, a la John Walker, are going to get even more that way. And someone who has serious addiction issues and some significant mental health problems from trauma is going to become even more that. But we're talking on a scale of being able to practically rewrite reality. That's going to be rough for anyone.
Yeah, Sentry's powers in the movie did seem pretty ill-defined.
Which they also are in the comic. I mean, they are very ill-defined in the comic.
Yeah, but he couldn't do this stuff in the comic,
Couldn't do which stuff?
Like the shadowy and the shame rooms, and like I don't think he had the mental powers that we see Bob using on people.
The Void does, though, to a certain degray. The Void's tendrils will, like, torture you and make you think of your worst thoughts and all that. That was one. Like, I remember that was a version, and this is what I mean. Yeah. We don't need to go down this rabbit hole too much further, because this is one of the issues. There are two issues with the Sentry. They don't have a clean understanding of what he is or what have you, which they don't need to have. But every time someone else does him, they change it ever so slightly, so it's very messy. And two, you can't inject a character like that into Marvel, because that Marvel universe is not built for Superman. It's not built for that kind of person.
Also, the way that he was injected, as that he had always been there, and Reed made the world forget about him. I am so glad that got dropped. Because that was really weird and awkward and weird, and I didn't like it at the time.
I might be misremembering. I don't think I am, but Marvel Man, the UK comic that eventually got turned into Miracle Man, that he was from like the 60s, and then Alan Moore did a run on him, and then Neil Gaiman did him.
I have heard of it, but I have not read it.
I'm pretty sure that Miracle Man does that. Like, and this is like 20 years before they do the Sentry, like erasing himself from everyone's memory because he's too powerful. I don't know why the fuck they created the Sentry. I really don't.
Yeah, like, exactly. As a longtime comics fan, I feel the same way. However,
they did a great job.
Have used him as well as they could.
They did a great job using him in the movie, and I'm curious to see how they use him in Doomsday, because he'll have to be sidelined immediately. Well, but he's kind of the trump card, like Captain Marvel is. Like,
yeah.
you throw them into the mix, and suddenly power scaling is out the window. Right.
That fight can't happen on Earth if those people are involved.
Right.
Why if Captain Marvel can travel faster than light, can she like slam through a planet like a faster than light rod from God?
I mean,
listeners, in case you don't know, a rod from God is a tungsten rod about the size of a telephone pole that is mounted on a satellite in outer space. And using fancy targeting and a whole lot of math, what happens is eventually you just give it a nudge out of the satellite. And when it falls to Earth, it explodes as if God himself said, fuck this particular half square mile.
Yes.
No explosives, no anything else, just a big old rod from God.
And this shows up throughout sci-fi, where instead of like shooting a fancy laser or having some really powerful missile, you just take something that's really dense and shoot it at a planet from orbit. And wouldn't you know,
really fast.
It just takes care of almost everything, including bacteria.
60% of the time, it works every time.
Yeah.
It was nice to see the Watchtower put on top of the old Avengers Tower. Yep. It was actually kind of nice to be back in the old Avengers Tower, even though they put the bar in the wrong place. And that was a nice throw and tie back. And that is a thing that kind of strings all the way through this, that we really shouldn't have been surprised at the end of this when Contessa said, hey, here's your new Avengers. That clearly that had been the intention from the some form of this plan, even if it wasn't with these fuck-ups.
Right. But it's also... I'm amused by it in no small part because you and I had previously discussed that maybe it was that because Baron Zemo isn't involved and you can't have Thunderbolts without Baron Zemo. And maybe that was what the asterisk was referring to. And also that was Zemo bad. That was also wish casting because god damn it, we both want Zemo back so badly.
Oh. If there's going to be so the new Avengers are going to be involved in stuff moving forward. I hope they find a way to bring Zemo in with a little bit of that old fashioned Thunderbolts story to it. One more thing about the Watchtower before we move on. I saw a actual published canon like diagram of how the Watchtower sat on top of whatever building it was in the Marvel. Was it Avengers. Was it Four Freedoms Plaza? Or
no, it's
because Avengers have a mansion; they don't have a tower.
I think they eventually
in the comics.
I think they changed that to align with the movies.
Anyway, the skyscraper that was sitting on top of it was Stark. Like it was a Stark building. It was
like Stark Tower or something like that, which is what it was in the movies originally, and then became the Avengers.
Because they were describing the different things in the building and how the Watchtower was on top of them. And one of the things that was in the building was the Howard Stark Memorial Children's Hospital. And I'm like, wait a minute. So there's a superhero base here in this building that is likely to be attacked by supervillains or a wide variety of other things that go wrong. And we're going to put a children's hospital in it?
Well, it's not that different from having the Future Foundation inside of the Fantastic Four headquarters, I have to say. Those kids are better equipped to deal with what's coming, but it's still kids.
Look, I just want to know when I'll hear people screeching about Tony Stark hiding behind children's hospitals in order to keep doing his extra-legal terrorism,
I'm just thinking Oklahoma City myself.
I thought I was going to be the dark one today, but no, my friend, you are cold brew made with tonic water.
Folks, delicious. Do yourselves a favor. Try it. Cold brew concentrate, just to clarify. Otherwise, you're going to get a really weak cold brew. So,
well, having done all that, I really want to get to the shame rooms because they hurt, and I haven't talked to anybody about the shame rooms yet. So, Tom, I gotta say they hurt.
Great. This is what your Patreon money is going towards. Is my therapy bill is from giving Chris therapy. I think it's also the shame rooms are also a good way though to get into a few more of the characters.
Now, did we see one for Alexi?
No, but I feel like Alexi's house was his shame room. Alexei ain't none of them are doing well, but I mean, actually, I don't even want to imagine what Alexei's would have been like. Much like I don't really want to get into Bucky's, though we've seen Bucky's through like Falcon and Winter Soldier and his dreams and flashbacks and whatnot. Yeah.
As a father, the John Walker one hit me.
Yeah, that was rough.
Mm-hmm. And there's a whole lot of, and not just dads, there's a whole lot of people out there who aren't ready for what it means to have a child. But they have one nonetheless. And not necessarily by child. I'm saying they possess one nonetheless.
Well, they're also not ready for, honestly, having, back to the point of like omnipotence, the power of God in your hands with a phone. You know, like it could have been almost anything that he was doom scrolling, right? Like he doesn't need to be in an explicitly bad place because of his downfall. He could just be in a bad place and that phone is not going to save him from anything. And all it's going to do is distract him from the things that he actually should be paying attention to, right?
Yeah, you have nailed it on the head. That you don't have to have failed publicly on the world stage at being your own hero. You could just have not been a great dude. Like any person could be sitting there ignoring their kid and scrolling because what the fuck is the kid going to know anyway? You know, he's like 4 months.
Or even, I mean, not even be able to process the fact that like the kid needs something because you need to not be thinking, you know?
You are not in touch with anyone or anything, including yourself.
Yep. That's rough. That's a rough place to be living in.
As much of an asshole as Walker is, and no one here is going to say he's not. No one here is going to say, you know what, I want to go hang out and have 3 beers with Walker. No, I don't want 3 beers with Walker. That doesn't sound like a fun evening. I mean, you'll have 3 beers with anybody, Tom.
And let's be clear, they'll come around. I'm pretty good at getting people like on side and ready to have a good time after 3 beers. I'm not saying I'm not. But
Well, I've seen you work a room.
I can do some magic, let me tell you. No, I would not want to have 3 beers with Walker because I'd have to spend entirely too much time working the edges of him being a bullying prick. Tone him down about like 3 notches, and I think you pretty much
3 beers.
You pretty much have a Walt in terms of attitude and approach to life.
No, Walker never had anywhere near the successes that Walt had.
I'm just saying in terms of like personality and how he interacts with other people. Insert a little bit more joviality, I guess.
I would say not in terms of personality, but in terms of just like, if you were ranking a number grade of 0 to 100 of likability, I will give you that Walker and Walt are about level.
Sure. Fair enough.
Regardless of what character they have inside of them.
Fair enough.
But yeah, his shame room is the one that I think hit me the hardest. I know that a lot of people have said that Yelena's was with the alcoholism, although she had like a bunch of rooms. She's just a Russian doll shame rooms, I guess.
In many ways, I feel like watching her shame rooms is watching probably a lot of what Alexei's and Bucky's are like, of just, you know, self-disgust.
Bucky doesn't strike me as a drinker or self-destructive like that.
Okay.
Alexei does.
Self-hatred.
Hatred, yes. Destructive, no.
Probably not. Probably not to the same degree, no. Also, there's a generational difference in terms of viewpoints on alcohol. That would be there too. How much of Bucky's perspective on alcohol and how you use that as a coping mechanism or not is influenced by him having been born and come up in the 30s and 40s versus Yelena, who's more of the now.
Huh, you're right. He would have come up through Prohibition.
But not just Prohibition, but also like, you know, it's been a long day, you unwind with this. And if you have a few too many, you just get up and you go back to work the next day versus obviously she was taking it to an extreme, but...
And then it was taking her to an extreme.
Correct.
When the dream was shoving it in her mouth because she wasn't in control anymore. And this is just where we are and this is what we do now.
Yep.
Oh. The Contessa's shame room where she sold out, or not sold out. She let slip about her father and whatnot, and he was he killed in front of her?
Well, the door's closed, but yes,
Gotcha.
He's murdered in the next room directly as a direct result of her actions.
That reminded me of someone that we both know. Do you remember who? We had professor in college.
Shit. Okay.
Who taught like World War II history and European history. He was from I believe Poland.
Yes.
But he told us, like, first day of class, he's like, hi, I grew up in Poland. I came here about 20 years ago or whatever. When I was 3, my father was hiding from the secret police and under the bed, and I didn't know that people shouldn't know that, and I told my mom, no, Daddy's here. He's under the bed. And then I never saw my father again. Let's talk about World War II, guys. Here we go. He was the most amazing professor. He just...
No, there was one class where he came in and we all knew that he gave a lecture the night before in New York. And we all knew that he probably had to have gotten back late on the train and all that. And he comes in, he looks tired. But he
looked like hell.
But he sits down and just like writes himself like 4 notes, stands up and gives one of the most fascinating 70-minute...
August 19th, 1939, and goes through hour by hour of the day because he just knows everything.
In 70 minutes, it's spelled... No one took notes because we were all just like listening to this just pour forth. He wrote a memoir, came out of about a decade ago, I think. A memoir-ish. He's got a few books out. I think he's about to retire, actually.
Sam Cassow, hope you're doing well. Well, anyway, so the Contessa has her own, like, lifelong thing, and instead of becoming a beloved history professor... she becomes pure evil.
Those are the choices. I mean...
Pure hot evil.
You see that a lot in, actually in Italy post-World War II. You see a lot of people either become academics or writers or what have you, or they become evil. Ruthless politicians who are closer to the fascists that killed their family than they are to what their family was fighting against.
I saw a great post on Mussolini Day that was a word balloon that said so much for the tolerant left, but was upside down.
You know what Mussolini didn't like seeing on Mussolini Day? A post.
What? Dude. I thought I was going to be the dark one today, and here you are.
I may have had too much cold brew. We'll see.
Oh.
And this is what we mean by have a drink, folks. Your drink could be anything, just...
I have just really cheap Aldi coffee in my thermos because we're recording at like 10:30 in the morning. So clearly we're not just hitting whiskey straight, you know. There wasn't a lot of music in this particular movie, which was okay. It would have been undercutting to have songs that we recognized most of the time. I did like the Where Is My Mind that was used as they used it. Mm-hmm. I think it was just in the trailer though, but I'm a sucker for that song too.
Oh, it's a great song.
Oh, there's a great, I think it's a MIA cover that involves Where Is My Mind and How Does It Feel by Blue Orgy. Was that the album or the
Blue Monday? Isn't
Blue Monday by the band
Orgy. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, it mashes those up, and there's I think another song that comes in there. It's really cool. And Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now by Starship, which was, you know, okay, cool. Here we go.
Yeah, I think it was a very good deployment of music. We were talking in text, I think, about comping this a bit to Guardians of the Galaxy. And
yes, I've heard other people saying that as well. And I think that is the best comparison here. But without the humor.
Well, I mean, there is still humor in this. There's still a very strong, but it's
not that frosting layered on top. It's of the cake,
it's a different level of humor. It's not an attempt to you don't.
This is a brownie with powdered sugar on the top instead of a triple layer cake with frosting in between each of the layers, and that's what Guardians was.
Sure, I was gonna say that Guardians actually has more of a Joss Whedon-esque approach to humor, where almost everything is more quips, more set pieces that are designed to be like, isn't the situation crazy? Like sort of deal. I see that. This hewed more to like the humor, like almost more of a gallows humor, which is appropriate for the people involved.
Yeah. And it was all gray and brown, you know, and kind of washed out. I saw a piece that was talking about this, and they pointed out that at the end of the movie, when they walk through the curtain and into a press conference, which Contessa, just chef's kiss, no notes. That was wonderful. But that fight was happening in the same place at the base of Avengers Tower as the fight in the first Avengers movie. Mm-hmm. But the Avengers got their real big heroic shot up on top of that bridge, up in the sunlight, where everybody could see them, and they look heroic. And the Thunderbolts are down at street level, surrounded by the rubble and the wreckage and all of this, and not in sunlight. They're in shadow, and they're they're dirty and they're beat up, and Walker's shield is destroyed, which it seemed like it was curved at the end, but it had been flatter in the fight right before that because he threw it. Like, again, I really liked this movie, and I assume that most of the people listening to this liked it as well, so we're just going to talk about these other things too. So that was a neat way to be able to contrast this to the previous Avengers, and that this is, in case you didn't catch it, these are not the upstanding, righteous heroes of the Avengers. And, it's a little heavy-handed at that point in time.
Despite the fact that it reveals itself to actually be the new Avengers and not the Thunderbolts, this is nowhere near the scaling of any of the Avengers titled movies. Like, it's not meant, they're dealing with a world-ending threat, but it is not, it's not treated or filmed or set up in the same way as Avengers Age of Ultron, Infinity War, Endgame, any of those. It is much more like a blown up version of some of the smaller scale Marvel movies, right? Like this is Iron Man 3 with more people on steroids. It's not a different version of the first Avengers movie, which is
the stakes are still very, very high, but the scope of the movie is very narrow.
Exactly. And also the ambition is different. Yeah. Right? Like this is not meant to be what Avengers was meant to be, the tentpole that launched the rest of the MCU, and it did it. This is not that.
This is, and that's okay. Like, it's not supposed to be a tentpole. It is a great stride forward towards where they're going towards the next tentpole.
I also wonder, though, if it's a little bit of a road marker, mile marker for where they're going with Doomsday, with other things, especially talking about the dirt and the grime and the darkness and all that. Like, what is the MCU going to be in this current world that we live in, and as it iterates forward and figures out what's next and what audiences want and what does superhero fatigue actually mean, and so on and so on.
And I hadn't really thought about it until we're talking here, because like I said, I haven't talked to anybody about this movie other than my wife, and we talk about these movies differently than you and I do. So yeah, this was actually a new Avengers movie, and didn't they officially change the name?
Yeah, so in the end credits, it reveals it's the new Avengers or whatever. But then on their various billboards, in different, I don't think they did it everywhere, but in the most prominent spots, they rebranded the billboards to say the new Avengers.
Yeah, like the week after.
After opening weekend. And I think that's also just sort of a nice middle finger from Marvel to everyone, like, get out there. Give us our opening weekends, or we will
find a way to do it,
or we will fucking ruin this for you. We will ruin this for you and for everyone else.
I don't think it's ruining it, but I do think that it is a way of helping to reinforce that opening weekend hype and trying to get back on the train. And I think that it did a good job of that. Like, because there's bad ways of doing it. Well, and
this is the right movie to do it with. When you got a bit
of a sleeper.
When you got Fan 4 coming out later this summer, when that's all going to lead directly into Doomsday, all of these things, like, if they're going to send a warning shot that, like, major shit's going to happen and the
get up with it, folks.
The other thing that Marvel can very easily say is, we can't ruin anything for you because the internet and social media exists, and they will ruin it for you before we even have a chance to. So we're just going to do it. If you want to be on the opening wave, if that matters to you, then you better be in the theater. And if you're not, then, you're going to find out that, it actually isn't Robert Downey Jr. playing Doom. It's something else. And it's actually a bait and switch. And
fingers crossed, man. I hope. I don't like that idea. But the new Avengers versus Thunderbolts, see, just like everybody else, and I'm sure this was the intention, I went into this thinking it was going to be about something like the Thunderbolts from the comics, and they found a way to completely upend my expectations of that and say, I know that you thought you were watching a Thunderbolts movie, but you've actually been watching our version of the new Avengers, just without Luke Cage.
Yeah. It's clever.
Or Spider-Man or Wolverine, weren't they on that team too?
Well, the new Avengers had a lot of different iterations and lineups.
Yeah, it was. But I remember in Civil War when they came around, because we're still there's a little bit of that fallout too. Although the blip has probably taken over from that as the driving force of things.
The Sokovia Accords came up in Brave New World. That was one of the things.
Oh yeah, you mean that they're no longer in effect, and Captain America was right all along? Iron Man's a fascist.
Yeah, I don't think that's been in doubt for too long now.
Having just watched Iron Man 2, I'm reminded. He is fully down for the melding of government and industry.
We've had this conversation before. Enlightened monarchies might be the best form of government. You just can't trust them. Like it just you can't trust that it will in fact be enlightened. All right.
When they work, they're just bonkers aces, just the best. But that doesn't happen often, and you have no control over it. So the new Avengers moving into it with the cutscene and establishing that they are lounging around in their fancy tower in the sky and with their Alexi's silly tracksuit. I felt like the scene was longer than I expected. Like it was a much more meaty thing. Mm-hmm. There are multiple beats to it. It's not just a quick little, there's information and here's here. Cause apparently that was filmed by the Russos as part of their filming of Doomsday, that counts as filmed for Doomsday on the Doomsday budget, and then they used it over here for that because they were trying to find a way to get that tonal thing locked up of having, okay, you just met these characters and you don't have a real firm idea of who they are now. Now we're going to let these directors and writers do this little couple of minutes here so that you leave with this taste in your mouth and it will blend more easily with what comes next.
You're also not going to have another series in between to help fill in some of the tensions between Captain Falcon and this group and all those things, right?
Well, and that brings me to my next point is that while they did a bait and switch with Thunderbolts into New Avengers, what the New Avengers is actually a bait and switch into is Dark Reign. Because that's what I got from this is that the Contessa is replacing Norman Osborn, who doesn't exist in the MCU. So they need to have someone who is evil and crazy at that high level who can take over everything, which is what Contessa has done at the end of what we now call the New Avengers. And I think that her team of killers and outcasts is going to be the stand-in, even though they're not bad guys. It's not like we've got Bullseye in here as fake Hawkeye, which that'd be a hard sell to the public unless you just call him Hawkeye. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that Dark Reign. It's like the Dark Reign story of Norman Osborn is going to be happening, but not the Dark Reign of the Dark Avengers or the Dark X-Men type of thing.
Right. Well, Dark Reign partially comes to an end with the whole new Asgard and the Void going ballistic. You
know what? I'm just going to step in here, Tom. I have said for years that as a longtime Marvel Comics reader, I feel like what my Marvel, my 80s, 90s, 70s, everything Marvel, kind of ends with that storyline of Asgard and Siege, which Siege is not the best story. However, at the end of Siege, because Siege comes directly out of Dark Reign, and Dark Reign comes directly out of Civil War, and they all link together. I think there was one more in there as well. Wasn't Secret Invasion in there too? But they all link up directly together, and they flow, bam, 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 bam. And the Siege wraps up everybody's story. After you've had the split of Civil War and you've explored all this stuff and then you had we can just take Bullseye and make him an Avenger with the evil guy. And look, we can make fake versions of all these with the villains. And look, anybody can be anybody. And it feels like Siege locked all that up. They were launching the Heroic Age after that. There were new number ones for everything. And then shortly after that, some series had new number ones and everything started kind of falling apart. You didn't have, the Incredible Hulk number 740. You had the Incredible Hulk number 4, Legacy number 740 or whatever. Everything about the industry changed. And it's probably about people of our generation phasing out largely at that point in time as monthly floppy buyers or even trade paperback buyers. So it's interesting to see the MCU be able to start moving closer to where that ended and knowing how many good stories are still left to be told. That was a lot. I'm sorry. I know.
No. I mean, I don't. The thing is, I don't have enough of a grounding to really offer any kind of critique one way or the other.
Well, I bet at least 3 of the dudes listening to this are nodding their head right now.
Yeah, no, but I take the point. I mean, I think it's always tricky to figure out, pull out which elements are doing what and what's setting off what. Cause at the same time, you have the ultimate line that's probably getting even weirder at that moment that's in turn influencing what's happening. I mean, when Siege kicks off, you've already got 3 or 4 of phase 1 movies out at that point.
I'm pulling up because I didn't intend to do this. January to May 2010.
Yeah.
So like barely.
So Iron Man already happened, but at that point, the Ultimates had influenced the Ultimates had influenced the movies, which then in turn influenced the 616 in terms of who Nick Fury is, right? Like you've already got Nick Fury Jr. or whatever, like in the wings about to replace his dad. So you
apparently know more about the Ultimates than I do, because like I read the first couple years of the Ultimates Avengers and Ultimate X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
I did for a little bit. I really did not care for their Wolverine with a soul patch.
You've been bitching about that since college.
Well, I remember in college because they came out as those weekly releases on Marvel.com, and I loved those. Listeners, if anybody has like a link to something where I can still experience that weird moment in time, I would love
where the panels pop out at you and all those.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Java based, and I don't think you can do that anymore.
No, I think our computers would actually report us to the police if we tried to even try.
Well, it's the same reason Homestar Runner isn't as much fun as it used to be, but they have new content, folks. So go check it out. Come on, Fahugwa gods. But
the Ultimates, the initial run of the Ultimates is why we have the MCU the way we have it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's 100% what Cap looks like.
Not Ultimate X-Men, not like Ultimates. The Millar run is what absolutely shaped all of that. What I'm trying to say is, I guess, there are a lot of forces at play here that are probably leading to a moment like Siege. And as you're saying, the summing up of that particular era of Marvel Comics and the major characters and whatnot. And
MCU is there.
And then the MCU happens, and now the comics are their own thing unto themselves, but also in a very odd way, a feeder system for ideas and characters and all that for the MCU. And so you just have a very different environment in which they exist. I was also going to say, though, I think the trade paperbacks might have actually, in my head, as someone who's run bookstores and had, tried to maintain graphic novel sections, and trade paperbacks, I think probably did as much damage to monthly collecting and the idea of monthly collecting as anything else.
It very much changed the way that stories are told, because they don't get interleaved the way that Mantlo even or Chris Claremont are doing in the 80s.
But I also think there's a cognitive effect of seeing of seeing all these volumes lined up, and it might be the exact same number of issues as would be contained in your long box, but the image of the long box and the ability to pick out one issue versus seeing
that has to stand alone, because it could be consumed on its own. Just like this could be the first comic book that anybody reads. That doesn't happen with the graphic novel volume 3.
The change in the artifact makes a really big difference in terms of how people consume and how they even approach consuming any sort of material like that. So yeah, I think that's just a random aside for me. We should get back to Thunderbolts. And
we're wrapping it up here with the end of the movie with the appearance of the Fantastic Four's pogo plane, I believe. I love the pogo plane. And you were talking about Siege wrapping up the end of it, and MCU is kind of there, where there's a lot of good stories they could do, but they don't have the actors for these characters. They are thrust into this post-Siege territory where you have new versions of the same characters. I believe that's when Sam took over for Steve for the first time, and you started getting some mantles being handed over and between people. After Siege is when you end up with Jane Foster as Thor and doing these different things where you have the character, but it's not the character. And as the MCU does that with the introduction of the Fantastic Four, we all can feel that there is an end to the MCU that is going to have to happen so that the XCU can thrive.
So we've talked, I think, on this and probably on the main podcast on a few occasions, and we've talked about this just in IRL, that the best way, I mean, this is true for DC as well, but not to the same extent. The best way to view Marvel is to view it as distinct universes that occasionally intersect. That you can have Spider-Man doing his thing with his rogues in New York City, while the Fan Four are doing their thing in New York City, while the Avengers are doing their thing. Here's an argument, and I don't think it's that outlandish, and it's probably been made by someone else before. But the MCU to date has simply been tracking the Avengers universe. That's it. That it has only been interested thus far, with the occasional appearance by Spider-Man, sort of. But in general, this has simply been, if you were only an Avengers fan,
This is how Marvel looked to you.
This is what it looked like. And now we're about to see those other universes start to intersect and start to both expand and contract that universe.
Except the way that this is set up, those are literally universes.
Exactly. Instead of existing side by side or existing in the same universe, but functioning in some ways, with walls between them. They're literally multiversal walls.
And with Daredevil being brought in to the MCU now and then back canoning all of that Netflix stuff, because now all of that happened, like to some degree, they can say this, that, and the other. Maybe they leave out Jessica Jones or something, but that shows that there's stuff going on that we just haven't heard about, and I was an X-Men fan as a kid. So when, when blood ties happened and suddenly the X-Men and the Avengers were crossing over and there were all these Avengers characters, I was like, I don't know who any of these people are because I have never read an Avengers comic book.
Yeah.
But Quicksilver is apparently a mutant and an Avenger. Okay, that's our hinge. Here we go. That whole Avengers world, I had no clue what was going on. It was confusing. I didn't care for it, so I didn't read it. And I was able to stay in my X-Men silo, and everything was just fine.
I guess before we wrap up, I think one thing that directly ties into the Fan 4 reveal at the end, but then one other element. The Fan 4 reveal. Do you think it's actually the Fan 4 on the plane, or do you... I think they're keeping that ambiguous.
I hadn't thought about that at all. Like, it didn't cross my mind, but you're right. That would be a great bait and switch that somebody else was sent here.
Well, imagine if it's Doom and he shows up looking like Tony Stark.
Oh, that would be a hell of a way to get this going, is just the plane lands, he steps out, and it's motherfucking Doom who has shown up, and everybody on the MCU Earth says, what's going on? And everybody in the audience goes, oh, this got fun.
Yep. So I think that could be interesting. I think Fan 4 looks the same way we're talking about Superman looking great. I think they get what Fan 4 is supposed to be, and I think it's going to be pretty fantastic. I think it's going to be excellent.
I was cautiously optimistic about Thunderbolts. I am cautiously ecstatic about Fan 4 because there's not a lot of Fan 4 stories that I think are very worthwhile, but I find the Fantastic Four as a concept and as a team and as a family important to exist to give Marvel the thing that I feel like this Avengers military guns heavy stuff that we've been doing so far in the MCU. The Fantastic Four give us more hope and light and exploration and curiosity and meeting new people, seeking out new life and new civilizations. There's a lot about the Fantastic Four I like, and I understand that as a monthly issue, it gets goofy and weird, but they're the heart and soul of Marvel, and it has felt different without the first family in it, because there is no first family in the MCU. And that matters. It really matters. In Astro City, their Fantastic Four stand-in is the First Family, spelled F-U-R-S-T. That's their name. They're the Firsts, and they're the First Family. And as soon as they're introduced as the First Family, you're like, oh, they're the Fantastic Four. Gotcha. All right. I get it, Kurt. Here we go.
God, that's such a good thing. Astro City.
Oh, such a good series, man.
Anyway, so I'm curious to see how they play that. I think it gives them a lot of room. I'm very excited to see Fantastic Four. I think we do, just very briefly, and maybe I'll cut it back in later, or maybe I won't even do that much work. I think we need to touch on Florence Pugh as Yelena and as Black Widow, because in the same way that there's like a Guardians element to this, one of the things that Guardians is a, kind of hijinksy, oddball group thrown together to become a team in a way that the Avengers just kind of makes sense. Like, these are the people that you would put on the world saving team. The Guardians are much more haphazard, as is this Thunderbolts new Avengers team. For it to be coherent and for it to really properly transmit what it's trying to transmit as a story, you do still need a focal point. And that was Quill in Guardians, at least in the first one. And in this, it's clearly Black Widow, Yelena, portrayed by Florence Pugh, who, if she isn't already, is about to be, one of the very few A-list movie stars left on the planet. Like, she has a charisma and a compelling quality to her presence that I think really, really fucking works. And I would also just go so far as to say that, and this is not any fault of Scarlett Johansson's, or it's really a fault of how they treated that character. Florence Pugh's Yelena is a far more interesting Black Widow than the original on screen.
Yes, and that very much came across in the Black Widow movie, where the older sibling, younger sibling dynamic, even though they weren't actually siblings, really shone through, where the older sibling has to do this, that has to do the job, has to be serious, doesn't get to be the whiner, the complainer, the wisecracker.
Part of the reason that she works so much better as as Black Widow as a character, and
she's just more interesting to watch on screen because she does more. She's not so busy holding her secrets behind her immaculately made up face.
But this is the thing: is that they've shown us with Yelena, they told us. Right, with Natasha. With Natasha as I blood on my ledger. With Yelena, her shame rooms are her leading another kid into the woods to be murdered. All these, and even in other movies, we've seen how dark and dirty Yelena's life has been in a way
that Natasha hides it all. Well, and that's her story.
And Natasha is shown to us from jump as glamorous, she is not an assassin when we meet her. She is a super agent.
Having just done Iron Man 2 where she's met, she was much more interesting to watch in Iron Man 2 when she was undercover in Stark than she ever was once she put on the outfit.
Black Widow is much more interesting as a super agent or a super assassin than as a superhero. And
again, in Winter Soldier, where she was the secret agent and sidekick, it works very well when she's not wearing the suit.
Yep.
Yep.
I think that's interesting. I mean, and again, I think Scarlett Johansson's portrayal and I think the Natasha character in general was exactly kind of what needed to be for that version of the Avengers. Mm-hmm. But I just find Yelena a much more engaging and interesting and compelling character. And I think Florence Pugh nails it. And as a focal point, everyone else orbits around her and interacts with her and she allows that to happen in all the right ways. Alexei would be it would just be a dumb character if not for how tender that interaction can be.
Correct.
Right?
If Yelena wasn't there, but everybody else was,
it wouldn't work.
Alexei would not fit. He would not be able to get along with this unless he was shown to be kind of a doting dad.
Well, and his whole thing, their joking name as the Thunderbolts, it isn't just because everyone thinks it's a dumb name and whatever. It's also how Yelena relays the story to all of them, that it kind of sinks in their heads. She is never acclaimed the leader. She just is, right? And that's just how it works.
Every team has there's two kinds of leading that has to happen. There's the tactical leading of the battlefield, and there's the emotional group-oriented goal leading of keeping the team cohesive. That Bucky is clearly the tactical leader, and Yelena is the heart of the team.
Vindicator and Puck.
Correct, yeah. Nobody is the tactical leader of Alpha Flight. They just go in and punch people in the back of the head.
As close as you get to it, it's Vindicator and Puck.
Well, wait, but which one is which?
Heather is definitely not the tactical lead.
She does more of that very soon moving forward, but we'll save that for the free episode. These guys didn't come here for Alpha Flight today, Tom. But thank you for joining us nonetheless. Like I said, this has turned out to be a much more wide-ranging conversation than I expected it to be when we sat down. So yeah, Thunderbolts, fantastic. Really feel like, I'm not going to say Marvel's back, baby, but I felt a lot of energy, feel really good about moving forward, and I'm very excited about Fantastic Four.
And I think we're at a point where it's never a question of whether Marvel's back or not, and I really don't personally give too much of a shit about
it's about whether I like what Marvel's doing now.
Right. Marvel's here to stay. Marvel will be for some time to come, and that's fine. It's just a question of which projects are good, which ones are enjoyable, and which ones, get our nerd hats going in terms of what are they going to do next. And this one is good. It's very enjoyable. Even the hard scenes, which are very hard.
And sets up what are they going to do next. That's the important part.
It gets us excited for what comes next. And that I think is a really encouraging sign for
the idea of Doom getting off that Fantastic Four jet. That's dug in my brain now. You're right. That's a very clever twist to really kick things off in the way that the end of Infinity War kicked things off.
The only way that it works better in my head, and that this is just for out of our own self-interest, if it's JMH that walks off that jet. And with that, folks, we thank you for joining us in this conversation. Chris is quietly choking on his coffee in the corner.
I bet you folks are as baffled as I am at times, but that is even wilder than me saying that Agent Walker should have been offered a job in Alpha Flight.
Jesus Christ.
Which I was disappointed he didn't, but I get it. That's fine.
So thanks very much for listening. Hope y'all are having a great day, and we'll be back in your ears with more Alpha Flight. And apparently, given how this summer is going, a lot more timely have a drinks.
Yeah, fingers crossed. So thanks for hanging out, guys, and thanks for subscribing. We really can't say thank you enough. Adios, everybody. Thanks.
Where is my mind?